Good day, grade 12, and welcome back to our virtual tourism classroom. Today we will be doing the second lesson on tourism sectors and concentrating specifically on conditions of employment and the purpose and value of a code of conduct. But before we start with the lesson, again I would like to acknowledge the huge role played by Erica Ferreira, who is the subject advisor for tourism in the Nelson Mandela Bay Zone 1. Erica has spent many hours working and preparing all of the PowerPoints, notes and activities. Thank you for your endless energy and dedication to tourism education, Erica. And also a word of thank you to the Eastern Cape Department of Education, specifically the E-Teaching and Learning Directorate, who have made this possible. My name is Penny Vosloo. I'm a tourism teacher in the Nelson Mandela Bay District, and I am presenting today's lesson. If we take a look at the CAPS, your curriculum, then you will see that today's lesson is based on the second and third section of what you see on your screen in front of you. The previous lesson was based on professional image in the tourism industry and looked at the factors that contribute to a professional image for both the company and the staff. Today we'll be looking at conditions of employment and contract of employment, as well as the purpose and the value of a code of conduct. Before we start, let me remove myself from the screen. Here we go. So now you don't have to see me, you can see the information on the slides in front of you. Right, we're going to start with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. This is Act 75 of 1997, and it is a constitutional document. In other words, it is a legal document, and it applies to all employees and employers. I'm sure you know the term employer is the person giving the job to the employee, who is the person that works for the employer. The Act protects employees and employers by outlining the minimum basic working conditions. So the different conditions that are in this Act, called the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, those are the minimum basic working conditions. So that is the minimum of what can be expected by the employer or the employee. This Act also gives effect to the right to fair labour practices. So we are very focused on fair labour practice and that we are treated correctly as employers and employees, and that is considered fair labour practice. And then the last bullet on your screen, you'll see the basic conditions of employment contained in the Act form part of the employment contract between an employer and employee. Now, grade 12, it's very important for us to be able to differentiate between two documents that we are going to be discussing in today's lesson. The one is at the bottom of the screen, an employment contract, otherwise known as a contract of employment. And then later on, we will be taking a look at the code of conduct of any company or any business. Okay, so here's the first one, and that is the document that is called a contract of employment. A contract of employment is a signed agreement between an employer and an employee. So what is implied there is that it is an agreement. In other words, both parties, both the employer and the employee, agree on what is written in that contract of employment, and therefore, because they agree with what is written there, they sign. And that signature holds both the employer and the employee accountable for what is contained in the contract of employment. The next bullet on the right-hand side of your screen, it sets out the conditions of employment particular to the employee and his or her specific position. What we must remember in this regard, grade 12, is that not everybody's contract of employment is identical. If somebody is employed at a hotel as a manager, his or her contract of employment is not going to be the same as a staff member who is employed in housekeeping or a person that is employed to do maintenance. So the stipulations set out in a contract of employment are particular to the position that that person is appointed in any company. By law, anyone who has been employed full-time for more than 1 month is entitled to receive a contract of employment. So if you have been employed by a business on a full-time basis for more than 1 month, you are entitled to receive a contract of employment. And then the last bullet on the right-hand side of your screen, an employment contract should outline all the main terms and conditions of employment and signifies the mutual agreement by the employer and the employee to these terms and conditions. So let's just take that last bullet and break it down a bit. In the contract of employment, there are certain stipulations regarding the employment of that person. And what is included in a contract of employment, we'll have a look at that later. But what I want to focus on here is the terms and conditions of employment of any particular employee in the tourism industry are included in the contract of employment. Both the employer and the employee will sign that document, and by signing, that means that they are agreeing to the conditions in that contract. If they break the conditions in that contract, then they can be held, or they will be held, accountable. So it's basically a question of having terms and conditions of your employment. For example, if your contract of employment states that your working hours are from 8:30 until 4:30 every day, and you arrive at work at 8:45, and you leave work at 4 o'clock, you are therefore in breach of your contract of employment. So that is the type of thing that is included in this document. And remember, once you sign that contract of employment, you are signing that you agree to those conditions, those stipulations in the contract, and therefore you are required to hold by those different stipulations. If you do not, then there are obviously consequences that have to be borne on your part. Now we're going to take a look at different conditions of employment that should be included in a contract of employment. Let me just break it down here and give you an example and say to you, you have been employed as a staff member at a bed and breakfast or at some accommodation establishment, and therefore you must be given a contract of employment. What should be in that contract of employment? Firstly, the employer and the employee's details. So if you are the employee, your full name, address, identity number, and the same information of the employer. The following thing that needs to be included in a contract of employment is what the place of work is, the date on which your employment will start, the title of your job. Are you a maintenance manager? Are you a concierge? Are you a housekeeping assistant? So that is what job title entails. Then if you take a look at the next bullet on your screen, a brief description of the job, including core duties. Now your core duties are your main duties, as well as your working hours. That is also a stipulation that needs to be included in a contract of employment. If we then continue with conditions of employment that should be in a contract of employment, in that document, your remuneration and your deductions must be included. Now let's just break that down so that we all understand. The word remuneration means whether it is your minimum salary or your wage. So what you will be paid for doing that job. Should your job require you to work overtime, what is the rate that you will be paid for that overtime? Is it double time? Is it time and a half? Those are considerations that should be put in a contract of employment. The frequency of your payment, in other words, are you paid on a daily basis? So you work for a day and you are then paid, and you don't receive your money at the end of a week or a month. You could be employed on a weekly basis. In other words, you receive your payment once a week, or on a monthly basis if you are paid once a month. Something else that must be included in that contract of employment is if there are any deductions. Now, a deduction is money that is taken off from your salary. UIF, which is unemployment fund, medical aid, pension fund, trade union membership fees, home loan, any form of tax, pay as you earn, or any tax-related deduction. So that must also be in your contract of employment, so that you are fully aware that what you are going to get once you have been paid to do that job. So let's say you are employed at a rate of, let's say, for example, 10,000 Rand a month, and you expect to get that 10,000 Rand out at the end of the month, and when you receive your pay slip, you actually see that it is less than that because deductions have been made. So money has been taken off either for unemployment fund or medical aid or pension or any of the other examples listed on the screen in front of you. Another consideration with a contract of employment is your notice and your contract period. Now that's two different things. Your contract period is how long you are employed for. Are you employed on a full-time basis and there's no end to the contract? Or is your contract for a specific period of time, so for 18 months or 2 years? On the other hand, should you as the employee or the employer wish to terminate the contract, in other words, you decide you don't want to work for that business or that company anymore and you want to resign. If you have a contract of employment and it says that there is a notice period, that means that notice period is if you are, your notice period is a month. That means you cannot just walk in and resign and walk out. You have to work out that notice period. So you are giving the employer notice that you will not be returning to the workplace at the end of that notice period. So those should also be included in a contract of employment. There are more stipulations on your screen at the moment for inclusions in a contract of employment. The first one is any leave details. This is leave that you as the employee are entitled to. Examples of types of leave could be sick leave. If you are not well enough to report for duty, then that is classified as sick leave. Annual leave, study leave, if you need to go and write exams or for study purposes need to be away from work, that means that you will then take study leave. Maternity leave, somebody that's having a baby will take maternity leave, and family responsibility leave. So all of the details about the leave that you are entitled to take must be included in the contract of employment. Then we take a look at the next bullet on the screen, something else that should be included in a contract of employment, and that is a uniform allowance. Now this depends very much on the company policy. Not all companies expect their staff to wear a uniform. If you remember the previous lesson that we had on tourism sectors, we had the topic of uniforms as well as dress code. So some companies will have a uniform for their staff and others will have a dress code which will give the staff guidelines on what they should wear when in a working environment. Now this particular one is a uniform allowance. Now, as I said, that depends on the company policy. The employer could provide the employee with one uniform or more than one uniform. It could provide the employee with seasonal uniforms. In other words, one uniform for the summer and a different uniform for the winter. Or, on the other hand, what could also be in a contract of employment is a uniform allowance. In other words, the company does not provide the uniform to the employee, but gives that employee a uniform allowance. In other words, a value of money for that person to purchase clothing that is deemed fit for that particular work environment. In the tourism industry, travel benefits are very important in a contract of employment. This depends very much on the employer. If you are fortunate enough to be working for an airline, they could perhaps provide discounted flight travel benefits to their employees. Perhaps some hotels may give a travel allowance for employees. For example, national parks, South African national parks grant travel benefits to employees for the performance of their official duties. So that is also a stipulation that must be included in a contract of employment. And then we get to fringe benefits. Let's understand the term fringe benefits. That is any benefit that you receive from the company in addition to your wages or your salary. So you are paid X amount to work at the company, but fringe benefits may allow you to be in a position to be paid, that the company pays a portion of your pension fund, that the company pays a portion of your medical aid scheme, unemployment insurance, disability insurance. You may get a vehicle allowance or even a company car. That is also an example of a fringe benefit. Study loans and bursaries. So any benefit that employees of a company are offered in exchange for their services. But we're not talking about salary here, we're talking about additional benefits. That is called a fringe benefit. And fringe benefits need to be in the contract of employment so that you as the employee know what to expect, or if you are in the position of becoming the employer, you know what is expected of you. Then we take a look at some more stipulations that should be included in a contract of employment. The first one on your screen is professional accountability and responsibility. Before I unpack that, I just want to read what is on the screen for you. The obligation or requirement to fulfill duties and accept responsibility for the consequences of actions and decisions, be they positive or negative. Now let's just unpack that so that everybody understands the term professional accountability and responsibility. Let us say that in your employment contract, which you have signed and your employer has signed, you have agreed to the terms in that contract of employment. That is your professional accountability. That is your professional responsibility. Should it happen that you do not fulfill your duties, you will be held accountable for not bringing your side of the contract. So as I mentioned to you earlier, your employment contract stipulates that your working hours are from 8:30 to 4:30. If you arrive late for work on a regular basis, you are not being professionally accountable. You are not being responsible in the carrying out of your duties. So therefore, you will have to take responsibility for the consequences of actions and decisions. So it's important that professional accountability forms part of a contract of employment. The next bullet on your screen you will see is service ethics. I'm sure we are all aware of the meaning of the word ethics. That is moral principles that govern a company's conduct with its customers, potential customers, and ex-customers. And service ethics are based on a set of values relating to the question of what is right and what is wrong. Now let's just unpack this a little bit and make sure that everybody understands the term. If you have a potential customer, in other words, somebody that you want to come and make use of the services or the facilities that your business has to offer, and you do not tell the truth about what you actually offer. So let's say you've got a 5-star hotel, but you actually only offer 3-star service. Then the service ethics of your business is doubtable. If you have an ex-customer, in other words, somebody that made use of the services or facilities of the tourism-related business that you are employed for or employed at, and that ex-customer you perhaps part on bad terms, and then as a company you go and slander or badmouth that ex-customer so that he or she has a negative image in the tourism industry out there. So what are we looking at here is a question of what is right and what is wrong. So it's about values and the values of your tourism related business that you are either working for or you own that business. So these are two very important considerations when it comes to contract of employment that are on your screen at the moment, and that is professional accountability and responsibility, as well as service ethics. Then there are some more inclusions for a contract of employment: disciplinary and grievance procedures. A disciplinary procedure is used by an employer to address an employee's conduct or performance. So as an employee, if your conduct or your performance is not up to expectations or not up to what is stipulated in your contract of employment, there must be a disciplinary procedure in place in order to address that conduct. Now, the aim of a disciplinary procedure is to encourage and maintain standards of conduct and ensure consistent and fair treatment for all. That is either giving a verbal warning, a written warning, or firing an employee. Now, I just want to chat about this bullet for a minute or two. What is important here in a disciplinary and a grievance procedure is that there are procedures in place that maintain standards of conduct, but at the same time ensure consistent and fair treatment. In other words, staff member A has some sort of a disciplinary, does something wrong in the workplace, and staff member B also does a similar thing wrong in the workplace. The disciplinary procedure of that tourism company must ensure that both staff member A and staff member B are both treated fairly and consistently. I also just want to digress for a minute here and mention what is written in the last 3 words of the middle bullet, and that is firing an employee. Grade 12s, that is a last resort. Firing an employee is not the first line of defense for an employer. This is something that has been picked up over a number of years at marking centres when the markers mark your final grade 12 examination scripts. And in this question 7, we find that you perhaps have a scenario where a staff member does not toe the line, or the staff member does not perform his or her duties suitably. And should you be asked what the employer can do or must do in this case, please don't write fire the employee. That is the last resort. Any transgression must be dealt with procedures, and those procedures are in place as indicated by the bullet disciplinary and grievance procedures. Each and every disciplinary procedure must be dealt with following the steps that are in the disciplinary procedures of that particular company. So you cannot just fire an employee for not doing the right thing. There are procedures that are in place, be they a verbal warning, be they given a written warning. Firing is a last resort, and what should also be remembered is an employee can appeal his or her firing from the workplace. So alternative steps should always be a consideration. The last bullet under disciplinary and grievance procedures, a grievance procedure is used to deal with a problem or complaint that an employee raises. So the employer has a disciplinary procedure in place to deal with employees who do not perform in the correct manner in conducting their duties. But on the other hand, if a staff member, an employee, has a complaint or an issue that he or she wants to raise, they will then follow the grievance procedure. And the bottom of your screen here, signature of both the employee and the employer must be on the contract of employment, and that validates that contract of employment. Grade 12, I want to again just interrupt myself here. I'm going to just talk to you about these 2 documents that we are talking about today. We have the one document, which is a contract of employment. A contract of employment stipulates the conditions and the detail regarding your employment. A code of conduct, on the other hand, is not the same thing. And over many years of being involved in the marking process of National Senior Certificate scripts, I have picked up that many grade 12s tend to confuse these two documents. You must understand that a contract of employment stipulates the conditions under which you are employed. On the other hand, a code of conduct is a set of rules that provides guidance to all staff on what is acceptable behavior. And that code of conduct forms part of the contract of employment and is, of course, applicable to all employees. So let me give you an example here. A person is employed at a 5-star hotel as a manager. On acceptance of employment, that person will sign a contract of employment. And all of the things that we spoke about previously, all of those details, those are found in the contract of employment. But what is also found in the contract of employment is the code of conduct. Now, the code of conduct is a set of rules that guides the behavior of both employer and employee under work conditions. So it is not about you work from 8 to 4:30, you get X amount of salary for your work for the month. This is about how you should behave when you are in the workplace, and also how you should behave when you can be connected to your workplace. The focus of your curriculum when it comes to the code of conduct is the purpose thereof, as well as the value thereof. Now, the purpose of a code of conduct is to spell out the conduct that is expected of the staff in the performance of their duties. So it gives an indication of the conduct. Another word for conduct is behavior. So what is expected from the behavior of the staff in the performance of their duties. It also gives employees guidance. It guides them on what they should and should not be doing. It's also about ethical challenges. Now, let me just have a look at some possible examples of ethical challenges. What about something like use of a company vehicle over weekends as a taxi? That is an ethical challenge. Use of the company premises over weekends for personal uses. You have used the work premises to have a personal function. That is an ethical challenge. That is something that is included in your code of conduct. Even something like taking the stationery from work is an ethical challenge. So this code of conduct outlines how to handle any conflict and also what is expected if conflict of interest occurs. It also pertains to the level of professionalism that employees should adopt in keeping with the reputation and standards of the business. So all employees, whether they be a manager, whether they be a member of housekeeping, a chef, whichever employee is expected to maintain a certain level of professionalism that is in keeping with the standard and the reputation of the business. The code of conduct also acts as a public statement and provides the customers of a business with an understanding of the ethics of the company. Now you have a lovely example of items that could be included in a code of conduct. At the bottom of your screen, you will see responsibility, coaching, innovation, ethics, goals, teamwork, customers, and trust. Those are all considerations for inclusion into a code of conduct. Now you will see that on the screen at the moment. I want to just focus your attention for a second on the blue section on your screens. Those are aspects that should be included in a code of conduct. Company values. The second blue section on your screen speaks to respect for others. The bottom one mentions violations and reporting misconduct. So what you will see under each and every aspect that could be included in a code of conduct is a short explanation and at the same time just some considerations. So let's take a look at company values. They are the foundation on which a code of conduct is built. So what does the company stand for? Does the company stand for honesty, respect, innovation? Because at the same time, if the company stands for that, it should be expected of all members of the company to uphold those values. Another consideration is respect for others. The Code of Conduct policy will explain what constitutes appropriate and inappropriate behavior. So what behavior is seen to be appropriate in a workplace and what behavior is seen to be inappropriate. And this refers to interactions between colleagues, employees and employers, clients, customers, stakeholders, and competitors. Some examples are given there. Good behavior examples, for example, open communication and an honest working relationship. On the other hand, you could have a list of bad behavior examples. Being violent, people making offensive comments or jokes in the workplace. Those people are in breach of the code of conduct of that particular company. The last one at your screen, on your screen at the moment, talks to violations and reporting misconduct. Now there you have a company's code of conduct needs to clarify what happens if an employee is found violating the clauses in this policy and how employees can report misconduct that they witness. So how are any violations of a code of conduct dealt with? Is there a zero tolerance approach? Does the company follow the approach of first having an internal investigation and then considerations of possible consequences of inappropriate behavior? So those are aspects that should be included in a code of conduct of a business. On your screen in front of you now, you have a wonderful representation of examples of considerations to be included in a code of conduct. On the left-hand side, you see professionalism, objectivity, confidentiality, competence, fairness and suitability, integrity and honesty, regulatory compliance, and full disclosure. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see there's an always and a never road sign there, which encourages staff members of that particular company to always be on time, to always be polite and honest, to always be diligent and considerate and professional, and right at the bottom, to do their best. But, on the other hand, also states that staff members should never be late or rude or dishonest. Staff members should never be negligent, inconsiderate, or unprofessional. But staff members should always never settle for less. So those are examples of what can be included in a code of conduct of a business. We also need to consider the value of a code of conduct. Now, your first two bullets that you have on the screen there are extremely important. So what are we looking at here, grade 12? We are looking at the value of a code of conduct. What is the value of having a document such as a code of conduct in the workplace? Firstly, it creates a cooperative, collaborative atmosphere. So it creates an atmosphere where people work together and collaborate. It's not one staff member that wants to be in the limelight at all times. People work together as a team. In other words, they collaborate. A code of conduct also promotes integrity in the workplace. So have a look at the right-hand side of your screen at the bottom. Integrity is choosing your actions, your thoughts and actions based on values rather than personal gain. So any staff member who chooses his or her thoughts and actions based on personal gain is therefore not promoting integrity in the workplace. A code of conduct is useful as it sets out what is important to a business. Now that involves ethics and principles, and also prescribes how staff should behave while at work. It helps to identify and state clearly which behavior is welcome and which behavior is unwelcome. It is therefore a statement of business ethics, and it guides staff, but at the same time, the code of conduct of a business supports a brand statement and projects the image that a company would like to portray. So it is essential to remember those 4 bullets because they speak specifically to the value of a code of conduct. Right, as has become the custom in these lessons, we end off with some activities that come from old exam papers. The first one that you have on your screen at the moment is from the 2018 final NSC the February-March question paper. Study the information below and answer the questions that follow. You have an extract from a computer screen or an email in front of you. Good communication is a key consideration for business when it comes to maintaining a professional image, is what is at the top of the screen. And then you have the words or the text the manager of the A1 hotel received an email in which a hotel guest complained about the poor work ethic of some of the staff members at the hotel and the lack of good service delivery. Now, just a word of advice, grade 12, before you start answering questions based on this extract, make sure you fully understand what is in the extract. Don't just go ahead and look at the question and start answering. Study the extract so that you know exactly what it is about. You have a manager's response to the complaint, and I read the response to the complaint from the screen for you. Hi, I'm sorry that you found the service at our hotel very poor. The staff are underpaid and overworked. We are a 3-star hotel after all. What do you expect? Cheers. And then there's the person's name and signature, manager, A1 hotel. So before attempting to answer any questions, make sure that you have actually taken a good look at what is in the extract in front of you. First question. Name the document an employee has to sign when accepting a position in the hospitality industry. Now, there should be no doubt that in your minds as to what the answer to that question is: a contract of employment. The second question based on this extract: explain why the owner of this hotel can take disciplinary action against the manager after seeing the email above. Let's just break this down a bit. Who wrote the email? The email was written by the manager. If you take a look at the tone of the email, if you have a look at the way in which the email is written, then you can see that it is not very professional. So go back to your question, break down your question, explain why the owner can take disciplinary action against the manager. So the manager has written this unprofessional response to a complaint. Now the owner of the hotel, the big boss, has now found out about this and wants to take disciplinary action against the manager. And the question is, why can the owner take disciplinary action? There you will see the correct answers up on the screen in front of you. The owner has every right to take disciplinary action against the manager as he is not fulfilling his core duty as a manager to deal with customer complaints. He brings the business of the image into disrepute. He should address the issues raised by the customer and not make excuses. And he speaks ill of the business. Now you can see all of those that have been mentioned in that correct answer that is on the screen at the moment are evident in the extract on your screen. Explain one reason why the hotel's slogan, "We put you first," will be included in the hotel customer feedback policy. And there is your answer to establish whether the hotel's delivery of service puts the customer first as promised in the slogan. Now, in the previous lesson, we discussed logos and slogans. If you look at the bottom right-hand side of the extract, you will see Hotel A1, we put you first. The manager of the A1 hotel has poor business writing skills. A. Identify 2 examples of poor written communication in the manager's email that should not be used in business communication. B. Correct 2 examples of poor written communication identified in that question. There you will see the answers on the screen. Hi. What do you expect? Use of emoticons. I am sorry. So if you take a look at the response of the manager to the customer complaint, it shouldn't begin with the word hi and then a small letter I am sorry. There's definitely not professional business writing skills evident in that extract. They give examples below that under B, where you are required to correct the examples of poor written communication. And the examples given there: good day, we try to meet the requirements of a 3-star hotel. That manager should not use emoticons and should write I apologize and not I am sorry, as using a small letter I. Then we have an extract from May-June 2018. You have 2 images of employees at a travel agency, Miss Harassment and Mr. Lazy, and there are questions based on those 2 images. Firstly, explain the importance of a code of conduct at a travel agency. Now that goes back to the second part of this lesson where we discussed a code of conduct. Remember, we spoke about the value of a code of conduct. And those were the responses that you had on your screen earlier. Here they come again as answers to this question. A code of conduct guides employees on acceptable behavior at the workplace to maintain order. It ensures that the company's operations run smoothly and the company remains profitable. And it is used by the travel agency to defend themselves in the case of legal action by employees. 7.2 discuss 2 ways in which the unprofessional behavior of the staff members in the pictures above can impact negatively on the work ethics of the other staff members, particularly with regard to harassment and laziness. So let's break this question down here. We have 2 examples of unprofessional behavior, harassment and laziness. And the question is, how can that unprofessional behavior impact on the other staff members, the work ethics of the other staff members in the business? There you have a whole lot of answers that are coming up on the screen here. You will be able to access this PowerPoint at a later stage, so I'm not going to focus too much on reading each and every one. I'm just going to give you a summary. It will the first one, 7.2.1, will result in an increase in resignations, which will force the company to have to recruit additional and more staff members. It will result in increased absenteeism, reduced productivity, and poor service delivery, as well as poor employee relationships. The second one refers to laziness. Again, low productivity levels. This can also influence co-workers to adopt the same poor work ethics. If people are lazy, other employees will have to carry their workload and they will not be able to function effectively as a team. And of course, there are going to be bad feelings between the employees. The last question here explained 2 ways in which the employer can deal effectively with the above cases of unprofessional behavior. Please don't write there, fire the travel agents. There you have the answers on your screen. Refer the employees to the code of conduct. Should their behavior not improve, gather evidence in order to take it to the next level of intervention. You cannot say, fire the staff member, please, grade 12. Okay, that's the end of the lesson for today. I hope that you have learned something. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I wish you well for your studies. Thank you.